It was a stadium destroyed by the owner. This is the rise and the fall of the Oakland Coliseum, breaking ground all the way back in April of 1964 with the idea that it would host both MLB and NFL games. Of course, at that time, there was no thought of installing a Mount Davis. It ends up going up and opening in 1966, getting the Oakland Athletics in 1968 from Kansas City. They started just 2 years later in 1968, along with the Oakland Raiders from 1966 to 1981, and then 1995 to 2019. Of course, that second stint with the Raiders came with the promise that they would build Mount Davis and expand the Coliseum's capacity significantly, but we're just going to talk about its early years right now, taking a look at the build. Originally, when I was researching it, the idea was to model it after Dodger Stadium, and you can kind of see how it works, going all the way around the three-deck approach, similar to Dodger Stadium, built into the ground. And because of the hills on the outside of the stadium, you can only see the stadium's upper deck from the outside. Kind of a little unique feature there. When it came to football, it was configured two different ways depending on the time of year, mainly because of the MLB season. You would have both the horizontal and vertical configuration depending, with the extra extended seating added onto the field and the bleacher seats behind it not moving at all. So the bleacher seats just stay there. They add more temporary seats originally before Mount Davis was constructed, and that's how they would host football. Fearing that they wouldn't have enough attendance to attract an NFL team in the early 90s, Mark Davis, the owner, constructed what is now known as Mount Davis, completely blocking off the views of the mountains and totally enclosing the stadium with its own separate upper deck outside beyond center field. It is the only pure center field upper deck that's not connected to anything else in the MLB to this day. And it's very clear for multi-purpose. We see these stadiums get destroyed all the time. On top of that, you have a really strange configuration. And one of the things that I didn't know before researching this, the way they constructed Mount Davis is like the exact same way it's configured for baseball. Like, you see all those sections that look completely disheveled. That is exactly how they built the thing. And then they bring the sections in, more sections in for football and bring them down. And it does look better when it hosts football. But Mount Davis might go down as one of the worst renovations in the history of stadiums, mainly because they really didn't even need it. They did need it to originally attract the Raiders because of the expanded capacity, but what started to happen with the NFL blackout rules, they would never sell out games because they had an extra 10 to 15,000 seats on Mount Davis, which would cause local blackouts in and around Oakland because they weren't selling out the games. The NFL's rules were, if you don't sell it out, we're blacking it out because they want people to go to the game. And they ended up tarping off even during Raiders games late in its life before the move to Las Vegas. They would tarp off the entire Mount Davis. So Mount Davis was closed during football games, and it was closed during baseball games as well, rendering it completely useless outside of the three-tiered suite levels that did operate during the football season. Looking at the capacity changes by year, first with baseball, you can see it opening right around 50,000, very standard for the time period. Remember, when this thing opened, the original thought was it was gonna be multi-purpose. That's because of the foul territory you see early on in its life. They had to make it big enough to also have a football field, but it was a lot better because it didn't have Mount Davis. There was still 50,000 in terms of capacity because it has that big three-tier upper deck that does, when you look at it, it does kind of look like a Coliseum a little bit, like the way the tunnels are. I like the look of it. I mean, obviously it's completely outdated now, but it was kind of a cool look back then. And then you can see the capacity still staying around 50K. all the way until they started tarping off sections. They brought it out. 1996 capacity at just 39,000. Mount Davis was completely tarped off. And then it got so extreme, they tarped off the entire upper deck, not just Mount Davis, and lowered the capacity from 2006 to 2007 to just 34K. Then they opened up 3 little small sections in the upper deck and raised the capacity back to 35,000 for about 8 years. And then they completely opened the upper deck outside of Mount Davis in 2017 back to 47K, and that's where it stands today, right around 47K for the capacity for baseball. So the tarp has been used a lot, not only on Mount Davis, but also the surrounding upper deck area within the stadium, the 3rd level there. And then for football, you can see originally opening with a capacity of 54,000. Once they add Mount Davis in 1996, it immediately shoots up almost 10,000 to 63K. And then due to the attendance issues and the blackout problems, they lower it back down to 53,000. And then it went back up to 56K. And of course, they end up leaving and going to Las Vegas without a stadium. And the Oakland Athletics have been trying and trying and trying. Originally back, the first plan that I saw, 2002, the A's trying to get a new stadium. 2006, they had a plan. 2010, they had a plan. The recent ones coming at Howard Terminal in 2017, 2019, and as early as last year, the new renderings that we got, none of them ended up working out. And it does look like they are ticketed for Vegas. The Oakland Coliseum, for as old as it is, remarkably has not seen really any type of renovation. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one, they considered Mount Davis a renovation, which obviously for baseball it was not. It made the stadium way worse. Number two, it got to the point where it doesn't make sense to have a big renovation even after the Raiders leave. You would think there's no use for Mount Davis. Why not just tear it down? Because they would have to reconfigure the outfield seating, and that would cost more money. They don't want to dump any more money into the Coliseum. They would rather at least try and plan for a new stadium or use that as an excuse to move the team. Like, oh, we have a horrible stadium, we have to move, and we have no funding for a stadium within Oakland. John Fisher, very, very unpopular, obviously, amongst the Oakland faithful, completely tanking that team. But the major fatal flaw with the Coliseum was no renovations, or at least no big renovations, since it opened in the mid-1960s. We have stadiums that opened in the 90s that have received huge changes, and this thing is still kicking. And it actually got significantly worse when they added on Mount Davis, and right now it is just sitting, doing nothing. The current speculation on it, it does look like it will be demolished when they do leave. I don't think it's going to go abandoned. I'm guessing the entire Oakland Coliseum complex, which includes Oakland Arena, which was formerly Oracle Arena, I'm guessing that entire complex will come down. There's the thought that maybe they keep the lower bowl that's in ground, because remember, the Coliseum, the lower bowl was built into the ground. They might keep that and turn it into a community baseball field. They could always try and repurpose it that way. But either way, the Coliseum very likely to be demolished in the coming years with the Athletics moving. It is unfortunate because it has been known as one of the worst MLB stadiums since the mid-90s. And for football, it wasn't much better. By the time the Raiders left, it was really, really struggling, and they could not sell tickets. So really sad situation. The Oakland Coliseum kind of going out with a whimper. A stadium that was ruined by the owner. In an alternate universe, let's say they don't add Mount Davis, I do think the stadium is salvageable. You know, at that point, it has the capacity of 50K. You can do certain things to modernize it, but at least you wouldn't have the extreme of the thing being completely closed and just looking overbearing the way it did. Another kind of little fun fact, during the A's playoff runs, like from 2012 to 2015 when they were good. Fans were very angry that they wouldn't open Mount Davis. They still kept it tarped off, even though they sold out games in the ALCS versus the Detroit Tigers. If they would have made the World Series, it has been said that they would have opened up Mount Davis. And Mount Davis, there's been a few times in 2018, 2019, in 2018 and 2019 that it was actually open for the rivalry series with San Francisco, where they'll try and fill it up. They'll sell $5 tickets, and fans have complained that it is very dirty, the state of Mount Davis, because it never gets any use. There's normally just tarps over it. It gets really rusty up there. But that is the story of the Oakland Coliseum, a stadium that was ruined by a mountain. Or I guess an artificial mountain is what you would call it. Guys, make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.